your heart loves the process. I think our ego loves the result. And I think what's happened with our society is like result, 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 and it's taking away from the heart of the process.
What do I need to know about your early life in order to understand a little bit about who you are?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a great question. You would probably need to know a couple things. I was an athlete my entire life, literally from the age of 4 is when I started my first gymnastics class. And have always been an athlete, was raised in a family of athletes. My dad was a professional power lifter. My mom, we love my mom. She never played any sports, but she got into the fitness world later in life, which was awesome. I think it was like a byproduct of being a stay-at-home mom and not wanting to go crazy. So she ended up teaching some fitness classes. Probably the biggest part of my journey and my relationship, honestly, with health and wellness and kind of that drove me into this space was my dad's experience with ALS. He was diagnosed when I was 9 and, survived for 10 years after that. So a really big part of my health and wellness journey and really my mindfulness journey was triggered by that experience. So if you knew me at any point in my life, that's always been a part of my journey since the age of 9. And it's a really big part of what shaped me. So, yeah.
So you lost him when you were 19?
When I was 18. Yeah. So 9 years. Yep.
How did that affect how you showed up in sports? Because sports was a purveying theme and a common theme
100%.
Throughout your life. How did that shift?
So it's interesting. When he got to the point where he was really sick, we had been advised to move him into hospice. Usually when it's hospice time, it's like you got 6 months. And he was like, the hell, I have 6 months. I got 2 years. So he ended up staying in hospice for a while. But it was part of like my athletic career. Like I would go to school, I would have my track practice or my gymnastics practice or my soccer practice, and then I would go and visit him. And it became one of the things that we could connect with on a deeper level. He was kind of like my coach from afar. And it became this relationship of, connecting on that level and really looking at the mindfulness piece of what athletics is. And how to stay present for, your meet days or your, game days. And I do think like that relationship that we shared while he was here was a big piece of my success on at least the track side of things. I got recruited to go to Bucknell to run track, and I accepted early because I just wanted him to know where I was going to be just in case like anything happened. So he died my senior year of high school, and it was actually the week of my graduation. So I had already accepted. I was already, going to Bucknell for track, and it was just something that I really wanted to make sure that he knew before he passed. So yeah, it's been a big part of even now, right? Like the mindfulness behind fitness and treating your body as this vehicle that quite literally gets to carry all of your talents out into the world and how you get to appreciate it and honor it. So
yeah, I asked this follow-up question, because I know you personally, I know how you reframe things and how your mind works. But how long or at what point in your life did his passing, did you reframe that into a blessing?
Interestingly enough, because I was living at home, this was like my middle school, my high school days, right? I feel like the grieving for me it started even before he had passed. So like I was doing...
Because you knew it was coming?
Yeah, it was like, here's your death sentence, right? Which like cat's out of the bag we all have, right? We're all going to die. It's like inevitable. So as long as you kind of allow fear of that to be, in the passenger seat. But I think for me, and it's actually really interesting because my brother, he's 3 years older, grieved a lot differently. Right? Like, I don't think his reframe started until way after my dad passed. But for me, it was like, I'm moving through this, almost anticipating this day where it's like, it's going to end, it's going to end, it's going to end. And a lot of the grieving happened like kind of while he was still alive, which is kind of interesting to look back on. But, a lot of my passion came through with like, charity events. And I was always doing like these spin-a-thons and like these fundraisers. And for me, that was like kind of part of the healing process. So I think the reframing actually happened prior to his passing. And then I think I went through a second wave afterwards, right? Where it's like, I can't, process with him. I can't share this with him. So how does that look on my, day to day? So yeah, it kind of like, it was 2-part, which is really interesting.
Because I know we share this in common. I lost my mom when I was a senior in high school as well.
Yep.
And it's interesting that you say the reframe came prior to his actual passing, because for me, it was more like, I don't think I actually grieved my mom until 4, 5, 6 years after her passing.
Yep.
And it wasn't, I didn't view it as if it had happened when it did. And it took me quite a long time to come to the realization that like my mom had passed and I was growing up without a mother.
Yep.
And once I had that reframe, once I grieved, things got worse before they got better. But then that reframe is actually what has allowed me, as it sounds very similar to you as well, has allowed me to show up in the way that I do, meet and greet people in the way that I do, have empathy on the level that I do.
Yep.
And allow me to pursue the things I want for a reason that is purely internal rather than external.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's a really interesting reflection, because I almost think like grief doesn't end. So I think there's different elements of it as you process, right? It's like almost that initial grief of like, okay, they're gone, right? Physically, like they're gone, right? And then you get into like an emotional side of like, although it's like they passed, it's not like they left you, but there is like an abandonment that lives in your body. And so it's like processing that, right? And then processing like what life feels like without a full family, right? Of like being around, like and you probably experienced this too, is like, I went right to college. Like he died in May. I was in college in August. And it was like all these families that like have your quintessential parents, and you're part of a sports team and you're trying to integrate yourself, but you can't really connect or relate because it just didn't feel like you were on the same playing field as it comes to background. So I think there is like almost layers of grieving and layers of processing that happen, regardless of how you lose them, when you lose them, if you were like quote unquote anticipating it or ready, right? Because I've had so many people ask like, do you think it was easier because like you knew it was coming, so you knew that like there was a timeline? I'm like, I don't even know if that's a fair question to ask. So it's just so interesting that like there are all these layers that I think you experience as you process and as you grieve. Yeah.
How did you, going to school, how did you deal with that feeling of abandonment in the body?
Oh, I don't think I processed that until years later. I think that to me was like something that I recognized. Probably I was living in Denver, so this was probably like 3 or 4 years out of college. So we're talking 7 years after he died. Like literally, like you piece it together. And I think there are still elements that I'm learning of like how I show up in relationships with others, how I show up in intimate relationships. Like all of that is so layered, which, it's beautiful. And it can also be really fucking challenging. Like it can be really, really hard to be like, here it is again. Like, why is this coming up? And there's, a side of me that I think has moved away from judging each piece of it, which is definitely more of a recent kind of approach to grieving and processing, is like, the judgment of why is this still here? Why does this still feel alive? It's like, well, because it is. Like it's literally still alive, and that's okay. So I think there's layers to it for sure.
As you talk about that, I had never heard it be described as abandonment in the body.
Oh yeah.
And that resonates with me immensely. But I also in the same of like, I thought I had processed these things. I thought I had worked through these things, and then something happens and it shows up again for you.
Like, why?
And where is this coming from?
God damn it. Yeah, totally.
And that was a recent revelation for me as well. And I'm talking like the last 3 to 6 months of like how I'm showing up in an intimate relationship where I thought I had done the work, but apparently this had resurfaced And I then needed to go back to the drawing board and re-look at myself in terms of how I plan to show up in this relationship, because who I'm being right now is a regression to who I was, not who I want to be in the future.
100%. Yeah, it's so interesting. And I do find the beauty in it now. Like, I think if you were to ask me this question 10 years ago, which would have been like 5 years after he passed, I'd be like, screw you. Like, there's no depth here. I figured it out. I got it. Right. Or it's like a piece would come up and I'd be like, why do I feel this way? Right. And now it's like this beautiful way to, it's feedback, right? It's all feedback for us to start to lean into what else is this going to teach us, right? And, I think there are moments like, every birthday I still write him a birthday card. And every year it's like, thank you for teaching me, even though you're not here, right? And I think honoring it in a way of gratitude, which if we want to go down this hole, I'd actually love to talk about this, because I think for a while, gratitude was a way for me to justify feeling shitty. So it's like, okay, if I drown this out with gratitude, like, no, it's fine. I'm here. It was almost like, it's like toxic positivity, but using gratitude. And I think for a while, I like swayed one way so hard that I forgot that emotions are actually okay to feel, and that gratitude doesn't need to be woven into every challenge. And now it's like a beautiful balance. I don't know if you ever experienced that, but we talk about like the inputs of like how we're managing and how we're, kind of processing. And it was like, for me, like, let's slam a ton of gratitude in here so I feel okay and justified in all my feelings, right? Which is really, really interesting.
I personally, this is an interesting conversation. I don't know if I've ever had this conversation with someone, but I personally would refrain from allowing conversations around the negative to show up in my life, as if those things weren't valid feelings.
Yeah. Yep.
Where I would show up and someone would say something and I'm like, no, we're not going to talk about that. Let's focus on the positive in this.
Totally.
And it was when someone told me, like, I mean, we can focus on the positive, but my emotions are valid. And it was a shift in perspective in terms of like, yes, there's good, bad, and everything in between.
Yeah.
Both of those are subjective.
Yes.
Like, good and bad are purely subjective. And then the way that you view the situation colors the light to which you're able to then experience. So if you're only existing on this, like, I need to be only positive wavelength, you're only getting to experience a percentage of life. You're only getting to experience a percentage of what it is that you are able to. Yeah. But if we're only here for, like you said at the beginning, death is the only thing that's guaranteed for us. Yeah. If we're only here for a short time, don't you want to feel and experience everything in your life to the absolute max? Yeah.
I love that. I think it brings up a lot of, this process of losing a parent, right? But acknowledging it in a way that allows you to grow from it. I do remember this, like, let's focus on the positive type feeling. And it almost swayed me the other way of like, wow, this really fucking hurts. Like, when it's really not positive, like, it almost created these extremes versus like being okay with living in the gray and living with like the power of the word and, right? Like, you can feel shitty and really grateful. You can feel frustrated and really happy. And I think starting to incorporate, I remember like the day that someone told me, I forget if it was my coach or my therapist, something. And it was shortly after. So this was probably in college. And one of my coaches at the time was like, how about you try using the word and? And I'm like, you're a fucking genius. Like, you are literally genius, because it addresses both feelings, right? Like, think about how we grew up, right? If you're a kid and you're crying and your parents are like, shh, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. That's validating a feeling that like you can't be crying. You can't feel that. But if you were to say, it's okay and keep crying, right? Like, allow the emotion to move through you. Like, I think even that could change someone's outlook drastically, is using this word and using like the ability to feel multiple emotions at the same time. So I love that you bring that up.
Do you think that's a coping mechanism due to losing a parent?
The ability to use the word and?
No, the positivity piece.
Partially, yes.
You and I have a few friends who have lost parents, but this is the first time that I'm trying to connect the dots in retrospect here, where we have the same experience, and we've had the same way of showing up in the world in response to it. Do you think that was a learned behavior?
I do. I think it's a learned behavior in the sense of, and you and I are similar in terms of like what we're interested in, right? Like you think about emotional intelligence, you think about like personal development. I mean, I had 3 of my best friends from high school, which is why we're all so close. We all lost parents within like 2 years of each other. And it's interesting to see the difference of approach. Like one, and I love them all, right? I love each and every one of my friends dearly, and especially the ones that, not especially, we're not playing favorites. If my friends are listening to this, I love you all fucking the same. But the ones that have lost parents, like there's different approaches. One's super avoidant, like don't talk about it. It's okay. It is what it is. Like that's it, right? It's like, don't even go there. Another one who's like still in like victimhood, right? Of like, why did this have to happen to me? Right? Like now that she's a mom, it's like, great, my kids don't have a grandfather, right? Or, and I think you and I probably are very similar in the way in which we approached the like positivity route, to the point where it was almost like, let's go really fucking extreme, because it feels way better to feel really happy than it does to feel really sad, and just let that be your life. I also think in the outlook on like your stance on death versus mine, like, I don't know if we're similar in that way. I don't think we've ever talked about this, but like for me, I'm like, okay, death is inevitable. Like I'm not afraid of it. Like I'm going to go when I'm going to go. And maybe that was kind of what caused this, like, I'm just going to be positive because I'm fucking here. And like, why spend my time negatively? Right. Or that it's like good or bad,
So I lost my mom, and then I lost one of my best friends in high school within 2 years of each other. Jesus. And that reframed death to me in a way that like it introduced me to the concept of it at a young age, in a way that it was like, okay, this is something that's going to happen. I've seen a lot of it, especially early in my life.
Yeah.
And here's a story that will like kind of contextualize this. So I'm in the process of getting my private pilot's license. Okay.
So cool.
And I love it. And I've always loved airplanes, and that the reason for it is like, I just want the freedom to be able to say like, I'm going to go to Colorado for a couple of days and go. And like, you know what I mean?
That's so dope.
But when I started out, I was taking lessons when I was in Arizona. And my instructor, Vic, this guy's like mid-60s, absolute legend, flies all day long every day and just like throws tunes on and like cruises.
It's awesome.
One of the questions I asked him was, has there ever been anyone that you will never get in the air with again? Or has there ever been anyone that you failed? And he goes, there are 3 people. And I go, what did those 3 people do that are different than everyone else? Because obviously I want to know. That's kind of like how I approach life too. I'm like, what's the thing that we're avoiding? That's the input we're avoiding. So let's then do this thing. And I align my life very similarly to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he goes, they're afraid of dying, or they're afraid of crashing. It's either crashing or dying. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, when we're in the air, they're very loose and they're like allowing things to happen. But when we take off or when we land, and to contextualize this, when you're in the airplane and you're taking off or landing, you're close to the ground. So you need to move very quick, short movements. When you're in the air and you're high, it's very broad, long strokes. So it's like you're going to turn left, it's like broad, long left turn, not a quick turn. And then, but when you're above the ground, you got to make very short, minor movements. It's like right wing up a little bit, turn to the left, like side to side. But when they're coming into land or when they're taking off and you need to make these quick movements, that's when they're most fearful. So they like white knuckle the yoke and they're not able to move quickly because they're so tense.
Yep.
And I go, we came in and there was one time that was a real close call and I was like very lax with it, not in a way that was like negating what was happening, but like in just allowing the experience to be what the experience was while still in control and still operating the machine.
Yeah.
And I recognized in that, and I did a little bit of like research on like introspection into myself, it was because I don't fear death. I don't want to die, but I don't fear death because I know it's something that's inevitable and it's really the only thing that's guaranteed in life.
Yeah.
They say what, death and taxes? depending where you live, taxes aren't even
Oh,
even guaranteed.
Jesus. Don't even say that's like worse than death, taxes.
So in that experience, it and I think everything leads into everything. I think everything's interconnected.
Yep.
And I think in that experience, it pointed out to me that not only was the blessing that I've been able to transmute from my mom's passing into why I do what I do now, but it also gave me an early introduction into something that's inevitable.
Yeah.
And then gave me the awareness to say, okay, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm not going to approach life as I'm trying to run away from this thing. I'm not going to welcome it any sooner, but I think that death is predetermined in some way.
Yeah.
And your life is going to be lived however you choose to show up. So there's no use ever thinking about it again.
It's almost like, and I'm curious if this feels like it resonates, is like just surrendering. Like that's the one thing that you can truly surrender to. And I think there is so much strength in the surrendering of what will be. And I even felt this like during my years of like competitive sports, trying to get back into the competitive space through CrossFit and running and all of that. But when I was an athlete, like, and not that anything running wise felt like death, but like truly it's like you make or break, right? Like you're in college, you're like, I'm either going to win this race or I'm going to fucking lose. And I think this ability to like surrender and just be present is kind of what is learned through that experience. I even think back like, and I didn't know that you had lost your friend too. I don't know if I've heard that story, so thank you for sharing. But I even think too of like, where else was I experiencing death? Like the year my dad was diagnosed, his father died. Like I'd lost animals. I was so connected to animals when I was little. Like I thought I wanted to be a vet. And I remember my parents like telling me about death instead of being like, oh, let's just hide it. Like, like she's going to be okay. Right. Like they actually like, we would have like spiritual like ceremonies for these animals, like literally my gerbil we would bury in the yard, we would light a candle. Like there was this whole like welcoming of this next life. And I do feel that like that creates an element of surrender of like something divine, right? And I believe in divinity and like having this like divine path of what will be, and living around that divinity and living these like waves of life that it's just kind of like a surrender in some way. I don't know if that resonates with what you experienced, but I could never be a pilot, I'll tell you that, but that's what it kind of connected me to.
Do you associate, because you're obviously very competitive.
Yeah.
And
sadly.
do you associate that like perceived death with competition as well?
I think I used to a lot more, which created maybe a different approach to it.
In what way?
It was just kind of like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to like talk shit. I'm literally just going to show up and go. And I think a lot of, and this might be because of the sport, like with gymnastics, I was competitive all the way through the age of 16, like went to the Junior Olympics, like so fun, right? But the second you're overthinking something and you're trying to control something is the second you like fall off the beam or you miss something on floor. Same with track. It was like my coach used to say, the people that are like so oblivious are such good runners. And I'd be like, are you calling me stupid? She's like, no, but when you get in your head and you run with your head versus your body and your heart, like, yeah, you're kind of like playing against the odds. And you know, I think it's like this divine path of if you just let go and go out there, the gun goes off and you just freaking fly. That's when you start winning races, is when you're not getting in your own way of trying to control it or think it a different way or, you know, get all heady about it. So kind of, honestly, I think more so in college, it was like, this is either going to make or break me. I knew I wasn't going to run in the Olympics. Like I was fast, sure. I went to Division I, sure. But like for me after college, that was when my running career as a sprinter, as we know it, would end. So it wasn't like,
it's when you upgraded to marathons.
Yeah. And then I was like, damn it, how did I get here? One of my coaches in high school was like, you're a sprinter now, but wait till you're like in your 30s, you're going to be a marathon runner. And I was like, okay, coach. And now I'm like, fuck, I am here. She was so right. But yeah, I think there was an element of like, it's make or break. And you zoom out of situations like that and you're like, really, was it make or break? Or did you just like create this make or break scenario? And whether or not I created it, that's how I lived it. And it was so fun. And it was so, I don't know, it was just like, it was exhilarating, honestly.
I think for me, in the past, especially with sports, before I got to the place that I'm at presently, I catastrophized a lot of things.
Oh,
where
100%.
If it, like, yes, if we didn't win, it was like death kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you recognize the people that are performing at the highest are the ones that are having the most fun because they've removed all expectation. I think Kobe actually talked about this once, and he was talking about, and if you know exactly where I'm going with this, please dive in. But I think what he was talking about, he goes, it's not about the practice, it's not about the outcome, it's about being as present as you can in the game itself.
Yep.
Because if you're present in the game, you've already done the work. You're responding now rather than trying to think and react.
Yeah.
And I think that is, I mean, that's a lesson for life, I feel too.
100%.
Because one of my favorite things, hands down, in the world is watching someone exist in flow. Like musician in a solo.
Oh.
Someone that scored an incredible goal, and like you watch the tape back and they're just like so in it. Yeah, it's because they're so present, and that's a state that I feel that we've gotten away from. Yeah, most of society, it's always meant to like work towards something, do something, always have an intention. And while I believe intentionality is right for setting something that you're moving into, once you're in the experience, you need to surrender, like you said, to what's happening so that you can be present. Yeah. So in line with all of this, and I believe flow and presence is a trainable tool, a trainable state. Yeah. Do you have any practices or habits or routines that you've used to optimize for flow? Taking a break from this episode to remind you that your inputs matter. This show was created to help you build a high-performing, healthy, wealthy life. And if you feel that you're getting value from this episode, please go ahead and share it with someone who you feel would benefit as well. Now, fun fact, over 90% of our listenership is not actually subscribed to the show, so it would mean the world to me if you went ahead and tapped that subscribe button. Thank you for being here. Now back to the show.
One thing before I jump into that, this like just popped into my head because you talk about process, right? Your heart loves the process. I think our ego loves the result. And I think what's happened with our society is like result, result, result. And it's taking away from the heart of the process. Like we talk about trusting the process and all of this. And it's like, that's truly what it is. Like trust the presence because your heart loves the process. Your heart loves to like experience and be in flow and be in like this state of, you know, like true presence, quite literally. But your head's like, get me the fuck out of present. I need to know what this is going to create. I need to make sure that I'm going to win. I need to make sure that I know this play. And I think, you know, you do see it at a very high level with athletics. You definitely see it with musicians. That's such a great analogy is like when you see someone just like just going ham on their guitar, that's their heart trusting the process to like, I don't care what the crowd's doing. I am like literally in divine flow. And that's beautiful. For me personally, getting into the heart space is like coming back to my body, like breathing, like actually like feeling, okay, my feet are on the floor, bringing it into a present state of like almost like a meditative state. Again, I refer back to like my college days of like all of these things that I feel like I learned, but my coach would always know that I was ready to run a race if I was yawning right before my race. Cause she's like, I knew that your heart was in it because like you were trying to get to a relaxed state and your response in your body was yawn. Even though like everyone's looking at me like, what is this bitch doing? Like, I'm about to kick her ass, right? She's yawning on the friggin' whatever, right? And then I would just shake it out and it was like, go. So I think it creates like, when you can create rather a space where your body is in full presence and you're in your full flow, like that's when your heart's going to guide, not your head. And I think, you know, I had races, I'm not going to say I was perfect. I had races where I was like, we need to win this relay in order to win this meet. And the second that I would go there of like, I need to know that we're going to win this, it was a shitty race. It was a shitty race versus being in presence, being in complete flow. is like hands down the best way to approach it. So I think, long story short, to answer your question,
well, before we get into the actionable pieces of it, I want to double click here because I feel like this is an interesting piece. First off, I love what you said. Your heart loves the present. Your mind, your ego loves the outcome. That's phenomenal. But do you think that trying to control any situation is an automatic way to remove yourself from the present? Would be a way to summarize that?
Ooh, trying to control yourself. Let me just make sure I'm clear on. So trying to control the situation is taking you out of your heart.
Trying to control any outcome.
Honestly,
because are you ever in control of an outcome?
Oh, that's a great question. I feel like no. I really don't think that there is like an outcome, because there's all the externals, right? And the externals we can't control. The controllables are how we show up, our energy. So I honestly feel like it's got to be like this divine outcome of like how you show up in any given place. That's a great question. I'm literally going to be up thinking about this one all night. I'm going to be like, wait, damn it. There's one situation where you can. I don't know if it's controllable.
I'm going to wake up to a voice memo tomorrow. I figured it out.
Yeah. I think honestly, the only quote unquote outcome that you can control is your energy, right? Like of how you show up to any given moment. And if that's an outcome, then sure, you can control that. But like these end results that are like quantifiable or measurable in a way that society would consider like a goal being achieved or it's something that's measurable, no, I don't think it's controlled. I don't think you can control this outcome. I think you can show up to your best ability and trust the process along the way and control the way that you show up. But I don't know if like a necessary outcome as we would view it in society is something that you can ever fully control.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I changed the background on my phone to just say energy and frequency. And for a long time, I tried to optimize for achieving or getting something.
Yeah.
And because of that, I was always outside of myself trying to get somewhere rather than focusing on how I'm presently energetically focused and what the frequency it is that I'm exuding in that moment.
Yeah.
There was a recent experience that I had that kind of like brought all this together. And at the end of last year, I went and did an annual review and stayed down at Miraval in Tucson, which is this like well-being resort.
Yep.
And I always do a lot of physical activity. That's something that I thrive in, and I love that. We share that.
Yep.
And I don't always do the introspective cerebral things.
Yep.
So part of my intention for this annual review was to focus more on the cerebral rather than the physical. But I wanted to do one thing physical. So I did this activity called Out on a Limb. You climb this 30-foot tall telephone pole. You walk across a wood log to the other side. Like you're strapped in, obviously, but you get up there and the beam's shaking in the wind. And like, I'm not afraid of heights. And I was like, shit, this is high.
Yeah.
And we get up to the top. And I look at the other side. I kind of have this like, oh shit moment, but I'm like, you know what? I got this. I trust myself more than anything. And I look at the other side. I'm like, all right, let's go. And I literally almost start running across this log. And I get halfway. I'm literally like 30 feet in the air, just like
You're
running.
like, the faster I go, the faster this is over. Yeah.
Correct. And I'm halfway through and the guy belaying me, he goes, stop in the middle. And I stop in the middle and he goes, look up. And it was the first time I had actually taken in the surrounding around me and like seen Mount Lemmon behind me and seen the desert and like heard the birds chirping. And he goes, pause there for a moment and take a breath, because the depth of your breath is the depth of your experience.
Oh,
that was the first time in my life
start
that I
sobbing.
Swear I was physically present in doing a physical activity. Like, yes, there's glimpses of it, but this was like so rooted down in presence.
Yeah.
I then walked to the other side and I said, all right, I'm going to go back across. That was more of a challenge to myself to see if I could. But the interesting piece is I did better in reverse than I did going forward. And I got down and I asked him, I go, why is that? And he goes, there are some people who are kinesthetic, learners who are able to feel and experience.
Yep.
There are others who are visual learners who need to see the outcome.
Yep.
He goes, you trust your body more than your sight, which is why you were able to move backwards easier than moving forwards. And I looked at that and I recognized that everywhere else in my life where I've taken maybe an exponential leap forward, it wasn't because I was viewing something and trying to get an outcome. It was because I felt something internally and I trusted the internal feeling enough to say, okay, I don't give a shit what anyone else is saying or what anyone else is doing. I'm going to focus on what feels right and pursue that thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. And it actually reminds me, I don't know if when you were growing up, I always used to hear this saying like, oh, I'll believe it when I see it. Right? Yes. Like, but I think what you're recognizing is like, no, you're going to believe it now and then you're going to see it. Like, it's almost like the belief comes before the actual seeing of it. And I talk a lot about this actually in entrepreneurship because a lot of the shit that you're doing, like, you've probably never done that before, like walked on this little tiny pole in the middle of wherever, like, that's probably not something you've done before. So it's like, I don't know if I can do it, but I'm going to believe I can do it. And my body knows I can do it. So I'm just going to do it. And then you see it happening and you're like, oh shit, like I just confirmed my belief. But I think like that literally just popped into my head. Like we grow up thinking, or at least I did, like I remember my grandparents saying this, like, oh, I'll believe it when I see it. Like you're going to make your bed and I'll believe it when I see it. Right. And it's like, why did we give sight such a powerful like confirm or validation to believe something? Like, no, why don't you just believe it? And then in your belief, it creates action. And then the action is what you actually see. So that's really interesting.
Well, it's entrepreneurship as a whole too.
It is.
Entrepreneurship, defined entrepreneurship is the act of solving problems.
Yeah.
So if we're solving problems and then the bigger the problem you solve, the larger the reward for the entrepreneur or the company. Yep. That means problems that have yet or have not been solved yet are the largest ones. Therefore, it's something that no one has done, not just you, that no one has done. So you need to be able to trust yourself enough to figure out or become resourceful enough to find a way to solve a problem that no one else has done.
Yeah. Yep.
So
that's it.
If that's the case, why then have we been conditioned? Because it really is conditioning then. Why then have we been conditioned to say we need to see the outcome first before we take a step back and actually feel, is this right? Is this in alignment with us presently?
Yeah. Well, think about how we were born. We were born with an intuition that we trusted and our heart told us exactly, our body told us exactly what to do. Like you're a little kid, it's not like you're logically thinking of shit. You just try it and then you learn through that. And I think when we're in, and I honestly, I think we talked about this on the last podcast too, like my challenge around education. I'm like, ugh. But going through education, like you are learning things along the way that are just contradicting trusting your body. Like it's like your brain and your body are going opposite directions. And so I think it's, you get to a point and maybe this was like, as we're losing a parent or whatever it may be, maybe some experience. And whoever's listening, like, please don't wait for that experience to actually start thinking about this because you don't need to have a traumatic experience in order to think this way. It's just being open to it. But it's not that we don't know how to live intuitively. It's just that we forgot how to because we've been so logical. And so maybe it's not about learning how to be intuitive or learning to trust your body or learning to lean into like this trusting the process through your heart space. Maybe it's just remembering how to do that and remembering that like we were actually born with all of that. It's just the years of conditioning, which you just mentioned of, okay, I got to see it, then I'll believe it, or I got to do this before I do that, or, what's the outcome? Like we've been conditioned to think that way. And so now we're just having to remind ourselves, and it's maybe doing those things that feel really scary or doing the things that like, yeah, maybe we need to believe it before we see it. And it's relearning and reminding yourself that still exists.
All right, let's dig in on some actionable pieces here.
Yeah, let's do it.
The first one being, what are the habits, actions, or routines that you use to dive deeper into flow and become more present?
Yeah. I think this is probably a broader overview, but like anything that has to do with nervous system regulation, like from a physical perspective, and you and I share this on probably a deeper level, like I was the kid that was like, go, 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 go. I still catch myself in that. And I think that regulating your nervous system in any type of way, whether it's contrast therapy or meditation or, acupuncture, whatever it means to like regulate yourself is so freaking important. Because if you are constantly thinking about something else or you're running on such a high level of like a different brain state, you've got to come back to the present, and it starts physically, right? Like your body knows a lot. And if you can get into that state of trusting your body during challenging things, whether it's getting into an ice barrel at 37 degrees or, experiencing something that, you've never done, whatever it may be. And I think this is honestly such a huge catalyst in entrepreneurship, is like putting yourself out there, feeling, like I always say, there's no room for embarrassment in entrepreneurship. It's just like, put your shit out there, right? But I do think that has to come with some type of regulation of your nervous system, because you are under a lot of pressure. There is a lot of societal pressure. And whether or not you mentally feel it, your body feels it. And so I think coming back to your body and being able to access your body at a deeper level comes with regulation of your nervous system. So in terms of routines for that, like I have an ice barrel outside. You can cold shower. You can do a bunch of different things to be in a state of discomfort while tapping into your breath. Breath work is a huge one. I got certified in breath work, not even to facilitate it necessarily, but literally to practice it on my own. I use this app called Newcom. I don't know if you've heard of Newcom. It's an incredible, I just freaking love it. And I know when my nervous system's off, because I'll come out of those Newcom like 30-minute quick little ones and I'm freaking having a panic attack. I'm like, holy shit.
You wear the patch too?
I've tried with the patches. I don't have them right now, but I have tried them with the patches, and it's just such a powerful practice. Like I literally feel like I'm living in between that space. And I don't know, you probably know Joe Dispenza, but he always talks about like that space between your ears. And I'm like, that's where I access. And it can be a scary place to be. And I think that's when I know like, okay, my nervous system's off if I'm coming out of this very meditative state with anxiety. Which is, it's really, really powerful. So, that to me is definitely like a non-negotiable, is making sure that my body can actually access that. Movement for me is obviously a non-negotiable as well. I think, when we look at energy not being able to be, created or destroyed, it's like, cool, but how can you move energy, and how can you process energy in a way that works best for you? Obviously, with working out, I think for a while for me, it was a great way to like, quote unquote, relieve stress, but I wasn't necessarily like talking through what that stress meant. So for me, the practice of movement was great for like that endorphin kick. And over probably the last couple of years, like, sure, you can access that, but that's not the only thing that you need to access. It's not like you can just shove those feelings down or press them down and say like, great, they're gone. Like I just got this really big high from a really good workout. It's like, no, but those things are still, active, and they could pop up. And you don't want to be playing that game of like whack-a-mole all the time with your emotions. So movement 100% is a non-negotiable for me as well.
I love the Joe Dispenza plug. I actually worked with him last year in Switzerland, and got to experience his meditations and his teachings in person, which is totally different than listening to him online.
Yeah,
insane. But it's almost like what we've talked about before. It's like training the body to experience the feeling before it's actually physically happened.
Yep.
So therefore, you're the creator of your reality rather than reacting to something that's been put in front of you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So the second piece, to double click, the remembering piece, what did that look like for you in terms of remembering who you were, or remembering the intuition and that innateness that you had?
Can you say that again, the beginning of that? Sorry.
The remembering piece. So we talked a little bit about how the intuition and the innate ability for your body to perceive things is something that's in all of us, that society conditions it out of us in a sense, and then it's the act of us remembering what we already are. Was that something that you've dealt with, or what did the process of remembering look like for you?
That's a great question. I wish I could pinpoint like an exact spot when this started to happen. It was definitely a realization over time. I don't think it's something that you just wake up and you're like, I'm going to remember my intuition today. Like, it is a practice. It is something that even still is an active practice because, I mean, regardless of what we like to, think, like our ego is always going to be there. And like our brain and our body are always going to be attached, assuming you're still like physically and alive on this planet. And so I do think that there's an element of active practice all the time. I feel as though the time that this started switching was really when I had a coach or a mentor pull out blind spots of like, hey, did you think of it this way? And when those questions are asked, or when you're looking at your life at a different level or a different perspective, or like quite literally zooming out, like I have a great way of zooming out of my life now to look down on it and say like, okay, this is the piece, like, what is this doing here? Like I've created such a connection with that and the ability to do that, that it's really allowed me to step into that space of like, okay, regardless of all these pieces that are moving, like what does my body freaking tell me? Right? Like, what does my heart say? And being able to trust that has taken a long time, because your heart and your head often don't communicate as strongly as we want. Like they're usually contradicting each other. I think the biggest piece for me that allowed me rather to step into the reminding of my intuition was slowing down, and holding space. Like I said, and I'm still to this day, like I have days where I'm go, 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 go. And I can tell when I'm disconnected. Did that happen overnight? No. Did the act of slowing down and being in a space that just allows like quite literally to anything to come into my brain? Like, yeah, that's what it took. And, I think this reminding is a constant practice, truly. And it's a trust that you build within yourself. And I don't know how you feel, but I remember the first time I meditated and I came out of this meditation and I was like, what the fuck? I got no answers, right? You're like, where's my like aha moment, right? And you're like thinking that it's a one and done, and it's not. Oftentimes when you get into this state of like, I just want to remember, and you're like, please just tell me the answer. It comes like months later and you're like, holy shit, I remember now, right? But there is an element, like a delayed element. So I do think this active choosing into remembering every single day is something that even I'm still practicing,
It's for me, it's the act of creating space so that those things can show up in your life.
Yeah.
And if it's not in alignment, removing it, because I often view growth as a game of subtraction than addition.
100%. I love that.
In line with the remembering piece, but more specifically slowing down, what is the biggest input that you've used in order to slow down?
I had a coach say to me one time, you're limiting yourself because you think you know it all. Like your knowingness is creating a ceiling. And that hit me so hard. Because I was like, wait, but I've been told this whole time that if you know more, then you like can be celebrated more, and then you win more, and then you do this and then you do that, right? And I come back to that saying a lot in, Christina, you don't need to know anything. Like actually it's better if you don't know. Because like there is a divine path, like slow the fuck down, take it all in, like get your head out of the way. And I when you ask that question, I that's immediately what came to my brain is like, oh, I remember. Like that hit me so hard of like, you knowing is basically you saying to the universe, like, screw you. I already know it. So don't give me the answers, Like,
I got this. You can take us.
Yeah. And the universe hears that. And it's like, oh, you think you know? Okay. Then like, what are my plans? So I think in like that ability to recognize that like in me knowing more. And I'm not saying like I will always be a student. I will always be a student, and I love mastering things 100%. Like there's a lot of shit logically that I know. And I think the most growth comes from when I remember that like my knowingness isn't going to support this remembering or this slowing down. Like the more that I lean into the unknown is the second that I kind of unlock these limits, which is really cool.
For 2021 and 2022 were big, even, I mean, last year too, but were big personal development years for me.
Yep.
And one of the things that I did was I went to a Tony Robbins seminar a while back. And one of the activities or the inputs that they have you do at the seminar, at the very end, is you take out your phone and you record a video of yourself talking to yourself. So that when you end up going back into life or going somewhere where you need a reminder, you're able to pull up this video and you're able to watch the video of yourself talking to yourself. And there was no intention or there was no like script or anything behind it. And I watched the video back a couple weeks later and I said to myself, I go, you need to lead with love. You need to trust without inhibition. And you need to know that you're right on time. And the final piece of it, I've now shifted it to I lead with love, I trust without inhibition, and I know I'm right on time. So it's very much in the present. But the interesting piece was that I always felt that I needed to go at hyperspeed because I won't get everything done in my life that I want to. AKA, I'm trying to control the outcome of where my life is going. But it's when I've taken a step back and said, I'm going to be present today. And if this feels in alignment with me right now, I don't need to worry about the outcome because I'm going to get somewhere. And if I focus on what works today, AKA the input, AKA the reason for the podcast and my newsletter, it's like, what can I do today that makes the outcome irrelevant so I can focus on being present so that when I get somewhere, it's going to be better than I could have ever imagined because I'm no longer limited by my own imagination.
I love that. It's like that whole idea of like be do have, right? That mindset of like, what are you focusing on being in order to do the things that you need to do, to have the things that you could have never imagined because you're so focused on the being.
Yeah.
I love that. Can I ask a follow-up question really quick?
Please.
So I think this is interesting because the do, the hurry up, like finish this or get it done. Do you think that sense of urgency was created through this acceptance of losing your mom and knowing that your time is limited on the planet? Like, was that ever like an overlap for you, or does that not even resonate?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't think that the do because I remember moments in my childhood where I still was like that even before she was sick. Like I remember playing video games as a kid and I was so monomaniacally focused on one thing and so like hyper aware of one thing where it's like I didn't eat for days because I was like, no, leave me alone. I'm doing this thing.
Okay.
And I think part of it would be like an undiagnosed ADHD, which I think all children in some way have.
Yep.
All of us have. I don't think it's a negative thing. I think it's actually a superpower because I can tune out the world and focus on one thing. But I think to answer the question, I think the do part comes from a desire to want to be worthy.
Yeah.
And I say that from the lens of when I lost my mom, I felt like I lost my importance because she was the one who held our family together. And similar to you, when you went to school and like you had all these families coming, I never had that either. So I would show up and it was like, oh yeah, well I have like this one friend here or like this person here. And I remember when I moved to LA, it was like, I had a friend ask me like, who was your crew like, when you were in Arizona? And I was like, well, I mean, I had this friend and like this person, but I was like, the reason I was so called to move to LA was because I had a community out here like I'd never had in my life.
Yeah.
And the first time when I spent like 6 months out here and then I left for retreats. And when I was leaving, I recorded a video to myself. And I remember saying in that video that this is the first time I'm leaving somewhere where it feels like I'm leaving a family. And I had never felt that for almost a decade. So I think the doingness comes from a desire to want to find worth, but an ill-conceived idea that worth is found in accomplishment and achievement.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And that resonates. I always equate like anything that can be measured is usually how we like define worthiness, right? Like number on a scale. I can't tell you how many times it was like, once I'm this weight, like then I'll be worthy of like doing whatever, right? Or, now we see it with entrepreneurship. It's like the number of followers makes you more successful. Like I think worth, is kind of equated to like a number, something that you can quantify. And yeah, that's interesting. Really, really cool when you're looking back at that. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How do you view, on the topic of worth, and
Yep.
for my own curiosity, how do you view your own worth? Is it in relation to something, or is it something that's cultivated within? And if so, how?
I would love to say that it's cultivated from within, and I know it wasn't like that forever. It took me a long time to understand that. Really, really long time. And I even have clients right now that I'll say like, well, you're worthy because like you decide you're worthy. And they get so triggered. They're like, no, but like this boss and this job and this, whatever. And I think for a while I felt that, like, I understand that. It was like, this doing mentality of like, the more that I do, the more that I'll have. And once I have all these accomplishments, or once I can, get to this place, like then I'll be worthy of whatever's next. Right? Versus like just waking up and being like, I am fucking worth this. Like I deserve this because I'm putting in the effort. And not even that because I'm putting in the effort, but because I'm deciding that I'm worthy now. So I think it was that switch of like really affirming like, no, you're worthy because you get to decide. Like no one else gets to decide that. And it's actually really interesting. I don't know if you ever had a moment where you start to learn that like your parents don't know it all, right? Or like your teachers don't know it all. It's kind of like when you go to Disney World and it's like, oh my God, this is like the best place ever. And then you like peel back the curtains and like everyone's like pissed off or like smoking weed or doing whatever like at Disney World. I don't know what people do at Disney World, but like it's almost like you start to recognize that they're just people too. And in they're just people too, they also have their own challenges. They have their own visions of what worth means. They have their own egos that get in the way of their heart. They have their own, disconnects of love and attachment and all these things, right? And so I think in my exploration of understanding that my worth can't be dictated by anyone else because they're just people too, was kind of like, that's when I gained my power back of like, no, but I'm just a person too, and I can actually decide that. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just have this like very vivid memory of recognizing like, oh my God, I love my mom. And this whole time, she's been really doing her best trying to keep me safe and like giving me advice and telling me the things that are like quote unquote good or bad or right or wrong or whatever. And then I'm like, wait, she's just a person too. And like, she's got a lot of shit too. And what she says, sure, I'll take it with a grain of salt. And I also get to decide. So it's like coming back to that remembering, I guess, to bring it full circle of like, realizing that like everyone's just a person doing the best they can with what they have.
That's what I was going to follow up with right there, because there were two specific moments in my life with my dad where I remember like I'll say like shackle breaking moments where I believed things to be a certain way and then it broke the chain.
Yep.
And then it shifted back into something, or shifted into something else, not back into anything.
Yep.
And those two moments made me recognize that we're all doing the best that we can with what we have. Wanting and I want to like clarify in this too, it's like wanting and striving for more, I don't believe is a negative. I think that that's a fantastic and like wanting to do more, to become more is a phenomenal thing, but not at the expense of the present moment. And I think that that's now, if we talk about like, I wanted to achieve these things because I wanted to be successful, because I wanted to be perceived as worthy. I think success is a great thing, but I now redefine it differently. Yeah, I think success for me now, I think success for me before was in accomplishment, but then it was fleeting because once you accomplish one thing, you're immediately on to the next thing. Yep. You're not able to sit in it. And I think success for me now is wanting and striving to be all that I can be without sacrificing the present.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that is a great kind of follow-up, because I've talked to so many people about like, okay, cool, but like if you're not doing more or like excited to do more, like how does that, like, are you making a sacrifice to like these big scary, hairy goals. And it's like, I love that you put it in the way of like, yes, and like not at the expense of my peace and my presence. Like that's the ultimate kind of like goal for me, is like, sure, I can strive and I can push and I can go and I can grind. And I have days where I hustle. I have days where I'm like, no, if it's at the expense of my peace and my presence, like don't fucking sign me up. Like don't sign me up for that. And I think that's a really beautiful realization, because, you know, I think our lives lend the assumption to, they're just going all the time and they're like getting their pilot's license and hosting these retreats and going on these really cool things and blah, 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 blah. I want to strive for that and strive for that and strive for that. And I do think that there's, you know, kind of that non-negotiable of like, not at the expense of what's really important.
I lost you at the end there. What was the last piece?
Shoot. I was just saying, like, I think it's our life lends to the assumption that like we're always on the go and always doing these things and these really cool projects and pilot license and retreats and all this stuff. And it's like, sure, we do all of these things and we're striving for what's next, but not at the expense of what's really honestly important to us that keeps us doing these things. Because I think like the peace and the presence, like those two elements are actually what allow us to continue going and to keep striving for more.
Agreed, 100%. Now I want to zoom out and kind of take an umbrella or overarching look at everything that you've talked about today and then your life as a whole. What input would you say has provided the largest return for you in your life?
Self-love, hands down. Like, if you can, because I truly believe everything is started from love, right? And everything operates out of two ways, love or fear. And I know that the human being cannot experience love and fear at the exact same time. And so if you're choosing into love, you're also making the active choice out of fear, right? So you're moving away from fear and into love. And I only do think that you can love as deep as you love yourself. And the more that you pour into yourself, like how many times when you're, you know, going through this whole process, it's like, put your mask on before your neighbor, right? Like, whatever it may be. And you're like, yeah, okay, I kind of get it. Like, pour into your cup before you pour into others. But like, I honestly think over the last probably 2 years, I'm recognizing how important it actually is. And the way that you love yourself, whether it's like showing up to do your non-negotiables, meditate every day, get your workout in, choose your needs, like down to the fundamentals of like, I need water, I need food. Like that is your highest form of self-love, is being disciplined in the things that you actually need as a human to continue on your path. So I think that is probably the one ingredient that I would say is like, start with self-love, because everything's going to stem from that. The way that you operate your business, the way that you show up in a relationship, the way that you, explore the world, the way that you view education, whatever it is, like it honestly is stemmed from that ability to love at your deepest. So
I love that as well. As a closing tradition on the new podcast here.
Yes.
What is your most gifted book and why?
Oh, definitely The 4 Agreements, which I'm sure you've read. It's fundamental, not just because Tom Brady used to read it before every season, I promise you. But it's like the fundamentals of, honestly, self-love, right? And I gift it to basically all of my clients that I ever work with, whether they're entrepreneurs, life coaching clients, coming on retreats, whatever it may be, because I do think that there are so many lessons that lend itself to loving yourself fully, and can be woven into, any aspect of life, any walk of life. So yeah. What's yours?
Beauty.
Did you ever share on yours what yours is?
I haven't. So it's progressed. I've had 3. The first one that used to be my most shareable was The Alchemist.
Okay.
Great book. Then it shifted to Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh.
And now it's When Breath Becomes Air.
Oh, I haven't read that. Well, now I'm going to have to go read it.
I won't. We'll talk on it later. Read that book, and once you do, or once you get into it a little bit, let me know, and I will share, because it has to do with my mom as well. of why that book is so impactful.
Okay.
And I think that from a relational aspect and from an intimate relational aspect, that book changed something in me that I didn't know that I was missing.
Wow. Okay. Well, I can't wait to read it. Amazing.
Mooch, this has been incredible. Thank you for coming on.
Of course.
At the end, I always like to kind of summarize the things that I learned today. So the first one being, heart loves the present, ego loves the outcome, I think is my favorite saying.
Yeah.
Favorite moment in time from the episode today. The second is that you focus on self-regulation and trusting your body. And the third is that your knowingness creates a ceiling.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that resonates a lot with me because I pride myself on my intelligence.
Yep.
And I want to show up in a way where I can teach the content that I have learned and help people. But it often, I can see, comes off at the expense of me wanting to interject my own thought rather than being a student to what the experience actually is.
Yeah. I love that. Cool. Those are great takeaways. I'm like, damn, did we talk about all that? That's pretty dope.
Like, it's been a great hour.
I appreciate
Mooch,
you.
Thank you again for coming on and have an incredible rest of your day.
Of course, you too.